Hello.
Hello. Jim, how long are you planning for this meeting to be?
Yeah, now I can everybody hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, good. Hmm. How is everybody today?
Doing all right?
Yeah,
Good. How are you?
good. Prodding through Lent. Lose my mind. Pete, is basketball done?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've been done. Ash Wednesday was our last game.
Oh, you guys
So-
finished early.
Yeah. So I need something to do.
Oh,
You came to the right place.
I was gonna say you don't have to ask twice about that. Wow. I
Came to
thought
the
you
right
were.
place.
I was gonna say I thought you were smarter than to say something like that. Who we? Heather, Jim, Keith Miller is not joining us because he's in Florida, and Steve, I don't think Steve I've ever heard from. I think Jim and Heather both said they could make it.
I thought all three of the first people were gonna make it.
That's well, I didn't hear from Steve. No, there's Lisa. There's
There's Lisa.
Jim.
Yep, there's John.
Hey, Jim. Oh, you hear us? Jim, can you hear us? You say no.
Sorry, I'm just getting everything going. Evening, everyone.
Oh, okay.
Good evening.
Yep.
Hi. How are
Hi,
you doing?
Jim.
Hi.
Good. How are you guys?
Good. I like your tuxedo cat.
Oh, thank you. He's a good one.
Yeah, we had a tuxedo cat. They seem to be very smart
Agreed. Agreed.
because we had a gray striped tabby that was not very smart.
Sorry, guys. I'll be right back.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi,
Hello.
Lisa.
Hi, Dr. Joe.
Hello.
Hello.
So Lisa and Kathy and Sherry and Roseanne ran an awesome game night last night at Bensonville First.
Thanks. It was
Oh.
fun. We had such a fun time.
Really good.
Even though I
did a lot
didn't
of-
win, it was
Oh.
fun.
Sorry you didn't win. Yeah.
Did a lot of Bensonville people show up?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
20.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was
How
a lot
many?
of people.
Wow.
They're very fun. They were fun.
Oh,
Including people I've never met, Jim.
really?
Yeah, like I'm like, who are you? Like, I've never seen you in 4 months. So, but it's the
Like-
usual church life, right?
Right. Yeah. So, like people that don't come to worship?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, it's actually very good.
Yeah. At least we'll know they'll come out to do fun things.
Mhm.
See if they'll maybe they'll come out to Easter service and we'll get to meet them. We should have made everybody wear color-coded shirts so we knew where they were coming from.
It's not too late.
Yeah. It's true. We probably could order colored shirts, but hi, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Hi.
Hello.
Give one more minute, see if Steve joins us.
Let me text Steve.
Okay.
Ping pong ball.
So Heather, I heard a little bird say that you were moving to greener pastures. Is that true?
Yeah, we have plans to move at the end of the school year to Fargo, North Dakota.
Well,
Wow.
So
so our weather
What's
wasn't
in-
good enough for you.
yeah, it's definitely windy up there. Yeah, it just depends. I mean, like in the winter, it's definitely colder. Right now it's pretty comparable temperature wise.
Well, there's nothing to stop the wind, right? Yeah. I think we had we took a youth mission trip up to the border of South Dakota, North Dakota in the middle of the summer, and it was absolutely miserable. It was so hot there. Um, we were putting kids in the pool at night to lower their body temperatures because they're kids and they're not listening to us about drinking water and doing all those things. And the EMT adult that was with us was like, they're all starting to get heat exhaustion. I'm like, okay, let's just throw them in the pool. So it was warm.
Steve is still at work, so we probably should continue. I don't know if he plans to join us at all,
Okay.
but we should continue.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you all for coming. If you would join me in a moment of prayer before we get started. Gracious God, we thank you. We thank you for this day and the opportunities that you have presented to us. And we're thankful that you have gathered us together as a team, and the business before you of trying to look at the administrative side of a merger between our two congregations. God, we recognize that in this we are supporting the church and the mission of the church, but that these things are important and they need to be taken care of and done. And so as we do come together to talk about these things, God, we pray that you would guide us and lead us in the work that you have set before us. We pray that you would be present and bless our fellowship and our conversations as well. But God, in all these things, we want to lift you up for all the work that we do. We do all this for the mission of the church, for your glory, and for the salvation and the transformation of the world. God, we do all this and pray all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so again, thank you for all joining. I did send out, when we set up this meeting, I did send out an agenda, and I think I'd just like to go down there and then we can have more open conversation at the end based on what we hear. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to add or talk about before we get started?
No.
Okay. All right. Then I will, you know what? I will ask Jim. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to circle back. Jim, I wondered if you could give us like a summary of your meeting with Foundry and maybe your thoughts around them and whether whether you would recommend we engage them or not, those sort of things. You're on mute.
Yes, be happy to. Excuse me. We had a good meeting. I'm just grabbing my notes here real quick. Yes, we had a good meeting with Matt and Carlin from Foundry, and then someone that Foundry works with locally here in the Chicagoland area by the name of Larry Hanley. It's a good meeting. They kind of went through their background, their experience working with churches and in representing them when looking at property transactions. I thought, did a really nice job. I gave a lot of good examples. They had provided some information in advance that we shared as well. Mentioned how they work with our conference, and then we shared with them kind of where we're at merger discussion wise, but also we shared with them the fact that at first we had an appraisal done and an assessment of our building. And then kind of through the course of our conversation, it was their suggestion that we as a committee here, that Christ look to do the same, get an appraisal done, get an assessment done. And then their thoughts were that we would, and I should mention, I have shared our appraisal and our assessment with the folks from Foundry previously. They suggested that we get the same done for Christ, then share it with Foundry. And then at that point in time, I mean, I think there's two components to it. They'll kind of know where things look with the building, so they could kind of advise us on their thoughts, I guess, of our buildings and the value that we're projecting with the appraisals and such. And I think would be happy to kind of continue to sort of chat with us about that. But then, and Jim, I think I'd said this back in, if I'm remembering correctly, in an email to you, maybe not to the whole group, but just prior to the meeting, about whether or not we contract, because what we would be contracting with them for is for two things, both of which are important. One is to list our properties for sale, if that's what we were to choose to do. But then I think more importantly, help us find a new space, because I think the first part of that we could do ourselves. We could just hire a realtor for if we wanted to just sell our properties if that decision was to be made. But I think the bigger challenge is finding an appropriate building space, piece of property, whatever, when we're going forward. So I think that's one of my main takeaways. Was I think that would probably be the most valuable thing that they would actually bring to us, is help us figure out potentially what property we go to next. But the point I made in a quick note back to Jim was that as to whether or not we should contract with them for those things, it doesn't feel to me like at this point in time, it's the place of the admin team to be able to say whether or not that should happen, because I think we're waiting from the vision team to really know what the future vision is of the church, to know whether that's stay in one building, stay in another building, go to a new building, don't have a building, whatever. So in terms of kind of that question of should we contract, my answer would be not yet. My thought would be not yet. I think we get the appraisal and the assessment done, we share them with Foundry, so they've got all of our information, and tell them that, you know, we kind of circle back once we really know what our macro direction is. So I'll take a pause and just maybe ask John and Pete, if because you were both there, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
if you would just kind of share if I've left anything out or if I've accurately represented the meeting and that kind of thing.
I think,
No, that sounds, yeah, you're pretty accurate, what that meeting was, yeah.
So I think that's where that stands, and I think the folks from Christ are gonna give an update, but then I think we put those together, get them to Foundry so they've got it, but then we're kind of awaiting what our bigger macro direction is, sort of from the
Okay.
vision team, and then it seems like for the entire merger group to try to determine.
Okay, all right, thank you, good summary. Then, since you already had the segue, Pete, if you want to update the team on what Price is doing then along those lines?
We had our appraisal was done on March 1st, by Warden. And, so we should be getting that hopefully next week. It'll be 3 weeks, I think, on Friday, so we should be getting that. The building assessment, we're on hold with that for the time being. We ran it by our ad council, and they wanted us to get another quote. The quote came in from, Dewberry, your guys, same company that did yours. And, some people in our congregation thought it was kind of high. So we got another quote from a company out of Elmhurst, ICI, and they came in more expensive, so, so yeah. So we have a meeting on 2 weeks, right after Easter.
That's what I'm proposing we move it to, because I don't want to meet on Maundy Thursday.
Yeah. So then we'll run that by them. So it's probably gonna be another 4 to 6 weeks before we get the assessment done. Plus, we were kind of like, you know, where are we at? Like, we want to spend $11,000 on something that we're not gonna, there's no chance we're gonna use the building. You know, is kind of what a lot of the other comments were. So, I mean, what's your guys' thoughts? Or is you the same thing? We're waiting for the vision team to find out what they're saying.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, unfortunately, the price is sort of high, right? But I think, I mean, but that building is potentially an asset, depending again on where the vision team lands, right?
Right,
And so I think having the information about what would it take what would it take to bring that building up to snuff would be useful input for this team in terms, I mean, basically, if the price is too high, then yeah, then we'd probably get rid of the building. But if the price were reasonable, I mean, that building has some, this is just my opinion, but that building has some nice characteristics about being accessible.
Yeah.
You know, it's in a relatively good location if we wanted to do something in South Elmhurst. You know, so I just think having the information in spite of the price would be useful. You know, obviously first understands what it would cost for them to stay in the building. And that I think is going to be, as a pragmatic consideration, is going to dictate a little bit of what we consider and what we don't consider. Right.
right.
I think having that same number for Christ would help us understand, you know, and to be truthful, I mean, you know, without saying we would go in any particular direction or not, it'd probably be a lot easier to knock down Christ and build on the property there than to knock down first, to tell you the truth, right? I mean, we're just one floor. We'd also make a great community center, but we're certainly not ADA compliant, and I don't know what the status of the boilers are, or the heating, or any of that stuff.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I mean, the $10,000 isn't great. But at some point in these conversations, my guess is going to be somebody's going to ask the question, well, what's it going to cost to make Christ, usable? And then we're going to have to pay that money anyway. So,
Right.
Well, part of it is what is making it useful. But it's really hard to say without any target in terms of things that we would like to have, the church participate in. For example, we had elder care in the West Room for a period of time. I don't know if you remember that, Pete. I don't know if you were here during that time. We had childcare there before that. It wasn't Buttons and Bows, but I think, do you guys have the Buttons and Bows, or did you? Or was that St. Peter's?
We had Raggedy Ann for many
Raggedy
years,
Ann.
and now we
Okay.
have a Montessori. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're going to have something like that, would we need any additional building to be done or not? But we don't know what people would like to have at the church in terms of different missions or projects, things, activities, things like that. And it's awfully hard to tell without knowing that what the cost would be if we need to make changes at either of the churches.
And John and Pete, if I could just share one other thought too, I don't know where you think your congregation is around your building about the notion of, if there's people who said, well, I'll never support, us leaving here or us selling it or whatever. And and I'm only throwing it out there because one of the things that was very helpful, not that everybody in our church is like ready to sell or anything by any means at all, but it, everybody knows, our building, I'm just speaking to our building. Everybody knows our building is old and it's really big and it's very expensive to operate. And we seem to have constant things that break and we have to fix. So everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But after we had the objective analysis done to say, this is a lot more than a $20,000 fix here and a $40,000 fix there, it kind of really opened a lot of eyes of people to say, oh, wow, like I never realized the extent of it. So I just think the information was very powerful if and when you get to the point of having to, I don't want to say convince, but just have people understand why, and again, that's only if it's the same situation, that staying as is isn't even an option. And so that's kind of, so that information, I'm just thinking more of when you're talking to your council, that information was very helpful. Because like, for example, maybe your whole council's ready, we'd do something new tomorrow, but maybe some of your congregation isn't. And so the information was very valuable in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say it, but the ad council is about half of the congregation that attends.
Sure. But it still could be even split that way. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah.
No, my impression is I think everybody's was the consensus at the beginning was we were moving to you guys. That was it, and nobody really, I didn't hear of anybody saying they weren't going.
Yeah,
Okay.
but also when the people were out, we did ask, what would it be to add a room on the south where, our west and nursery area. We didn't get into, the size of that or anything like that because, what use is it going to be? And without knowing the use, it's hard to estimate what the size ought to be.
Right. So Jim, correct me. Go ahead, Heather.
I just wanted to kind of throw out here, and I am as guilty of this as anything. I feel like we get into like a circular reference argument with all of this. Because we've had the same thing too, saying, well, we don't know what the admin team is going to do, so what do we do? But I will say that the building study, as Jim said, maybe coming at it from a perspective of, because I'm an accountant and I work in structures and rules and things like that. And so, and not so much, but what it did was, it was, you know, it was a comprehensive study. It had data. There was lots of data for people to chew on. And so instead of just saying, well, before you can even talk about, so say someone was mentioning adding on to the building. Well, before you can even do that, don't you need to know your baseline of what's standing there, like safety, you know, like if there's some, I'm not saying that there is some fatal flaw, but coming back to the issue of convincing council, because I was like, oh, that's a lot of money. But I think at the end of the day, it's to convince them it's worth it to do that cost, because you have to have a baseline to start from. So, you know, that way they can, yes, it's expensive, choose a company, get the data, have your base data, and then again, so we're not caught in this circular reference, but then we can go from there and say, we have the data from both church, all these buildings of potential expenses to, you know, as we go forward in this merger and analyzing all the properties that are available.
Yeah.
I think
And
you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I think part of the problem the last meeting was we were kind of convinced that our building was going to get sold. I think it's the consensus that there was no way that that building was going to be used, right? I mean, you two guys kind of.
Yeah, but you see, you know what though? I think that was an assumption that we've never said. At least I've never said that. I mean,
Right, but I mean, when you look at, if you looked at, and not knowing what is gonna entail to fix your building up, your property's downtown, location.
Yeah,
Yeah.
location for you guys.
but
Right.
I don't, right.
Right.
But I don't, so I don't know that I'm saying that I am advocating that we would move both congregations into the Christ building. I'm not sure I'm advocating that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is, well, it's an asset we have on a piece of property that's in a pretty good location relative to South Elgin. And if the vision team, if we did decide that we were going to go this direction, would it be something we would want to hold on as a community center, as an outreach center, as a place to start a dinner church because it's accessible? I think that as the vision team is trying to think through those things, the one thing, so actually to John, to sort of address what you're saying, right? And you moved on my screen, sorry. Is that there is a cost, like Heather's saying, there's a cost to bring the existing structure without any addition up to snuff. Like if we had to bring it up to ADA compliance, if we knew that we were going to do something and we had to bring, I mean, I don't know, but the city could be like, well, okay, now you're doing something more public. We really want you to bring the entire fire system up to compliance, right? I mean, they kind of let us slide on some parts of the fire system because we were like, look, we're only in here 2 hours a week, right?
Right.
And so I think that, again, like to Heather's point, having a price that says, okay, if you did nothing else with this building, this is how much it would cost to bring it up to safety standards, up to code, up to ADA compliance. And then you have that number. Now the vision team says, well, we'd really be interested in adding a multi-purpose room to that, that northwest corner. Okay, now you have to add that price on to the bringing the rest of the building.
Right.
I think it's important information because, again, if somebody comes back and we spend the $10,000 and we get a price like First did, and they said, well, it's going to be $5 million to bring this building up to snuff. Okay, that conversation is probably over, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the data helps the vision team identify what is in the realm of pragmatic possibility and what is just, right. Let's not even waste our time talking about this because we're never going to afford this, right?
Right. Well, I don't think you got to convince me or John.
Yeah, no, right. But I think that that's got to be our message when
Right.
we meet
And
with
we
our
did
council.
with,
That's got to be our message to them.
yeah, with Dewberry, we did ask them about expansion possibilities, like can we go up? They don't think we could go up. But can we go out in front and we don't really have a lot of other room other than going south. If we were to expand on
Right.
it.
That's right. But we have a
Okay.
huge lawn to the south, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But so when they give us the report, that's gonna be in there. That stuff is
Yeah.
gonna be in there.
Okay.
Can I
But-
ask a very specific question around that? Pete, that you brought that up. I've always wondered, I don't know the answer. Does the church have an agreement with the school district around parking? Or are you technically, you just, have rights to and your own
So-
parking, but then, you use the church school on
So
Sundays?
That's
Jim,
confusing.
yeah, so Jim, here's the short answer. Is the school does not have enough parking for its staff. Okay. And we don't have a garbage service. We don't pay for one. Okay. So we drop garbage in their dumpster and they don't ask questions. And during the week, their staff parks in our parking lot and we don't ask questions.
And can I tell you, I love that.
Okay.
Fantastic.
We did run into problems in terms of snow removal because the district apparently had changed its procedure, saying that it would not do any snow removal. But what happened was there was a good hunk of snow, and the faculty and whomever uses the regular school lot wasn't able to find a place to park. So we sort of switched things up on that, and now we get snow removal. It's limited because it's at just that little area, but they also get parking when it snows.
Gotcha.
We,
That's a beautiful
we
thing.
suspect that there'd be all kinds of legal agreements if we had to make this formal, right? And
Yeah.
it's just
And so we have
better.
not.
But just so you know, so that road that goes between the school and us is a private road. And half that road is owned by the school and the other half is owned by us.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that background. I've always wondered about
So there's a whole thing there. Okay. So I think that the takeaway from this is I think that I would like it if when Christ goes back to its ad council meeting, given that we've got a higher price here, is that we explain to the council why this $10,000 is probably a useful thing to pay for. And
Good investment in the future of this.
absolutely right.
Can
So
I ask?
I think
I'm
that's
just really curious. Sorry. What was the Dewberry price?
10.5, up to 10.5.
And what was ICI?
They were 11.5 plus
I think it
expenses.
was, yeah, 11.5 plus expenses, what I remember.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just curious. Thank you.
And what was it? What was our the assessment?
15
Or the
bucks.
appraisal?
Not yet.
Huh? Oh, they haven't. Oh, that's right. We haven't got it. Okay.
PGV,
All right.
that should be coming in hopefully in the next week or two.
Okay. You know what? Just as a side note too, we did an appraisal with Foundry for Calvary in Villa Park, and so they gave us an appraisal that there's a real estate agent on my council there that it like kind of the universal impression of the appraisal we got from them was this is high. And so we actually, Calvary actually went off and paid for another professional appraisal, which came in more in line with what we thought based on comp sales in Villa Park for church buildings. So it's actually, I think it's probably to our advantage that we're not using Foundry for this because I think they have a tendency to give a relatively optimistic.
Right. Yeah. You want an appraiser to do an appraiser, not a realtor.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because Jim was going to Cause I think we could sublot that out for houses.
Mhm.
So he was gonna give an appraisal if it
Right.
that way, an appraisal on the building, and
Good.
so it should be pretty in depth a little bit.
Good. Okay. Cool. All right. Any questions then on those two items? So it sounds like we're going to defer Foundry. We'll give them the data, but we're not going to actively engage them. I think that that's a good suggestion, Jim. And then the Christ side will work on getting the building study done next to the appraisal, and then we'll both have apples to apples that we can talk about in the future.
One final question, if I may, real quick. I'm sorry. Have I shared? I think I've shared a copy of our assessment with the Christ folks, right? Like that
No.
you're able. Would you? Okay, I apologize if I haven't. I would imagine maybe it would be helpful if I sent that to you and then you could show it to your council.
Sure.
I
We
would
can
think
show
that
it to-
would help, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and believe I didn't mean not to. I thought it was already out there, but yes, I'll be when we're done tonight. I'll send you a copy of the full report, and then your folks can at least see. Well, if we're going to pay $10,000, what are we going to get?
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, I'll send that to
Okay.
you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim.
You bet.
Any other comments or questions then on the building stuff? Okay. Go to the next item then. So the legal merger requirements in the process. Heather, were you able to find, so I have a view of what I believe your incorporation status is. Do you, what do you have in terms of your FUMC's incorporation status?
I actually looked into it for both entities because all of the stuff is available
Yeah.
online. I called DuPage County and I spoke to people at the state of Illinois as well. What it comes down to is perhaps I don't think Christ at any time was incorporated in the state of Illinois. Possibly Elmhurst first was, but we were probably done as a religious corporation that was registered with the county. Any of that registration has since not been kept up. I can say with certainty that neither is a corporation registered with the state, because they would be included on the database, and also we would get a lovely letter from the state every year asking to re-register and pay a fee, which I know we have not done. So I have from DuPage, again, there was very little. We're very lucky. The indexing and the data out there for state of Illinois and for DuPage County online is very thorough. I did have to call DuPage County and talk to the folks there, and they had to pull a few records from their books that were not indexed and filmed online. I paid like $20 and it's fine. So we found some records. There was just a couple records online about so Christ's recent property sale where you guys sold like the parsonage to the city, so that's all public record. We have, first with Jim Rogers, you probably know, going back to like 1927, all the different names that we've gone through as an entity at First United Methodist Church. And so those were recorded with the county. And so that says that at one point we considered ourselves that kind of religious corporation, but it was, I guess the short answer is no, we're not as of right now. And so I guess my recommendation would be at this point for us, there is some guidance out there. I think we're almost at the point where we need to take this documentation and our assumptions, and this is where we just need to let the legal firm do the, we've kind of confirmed that we're not incorporated. We know that we want probably a new entity to be incorporated and have the associated structures with that. My thoughts are just, I think we're kind of at the point again at the point we're ready to engage a law firm, to kind of guide us through all the voting process and all of that. I can't remember if we talked about, just 1 second.
Which one was 2/3 of all the membership and which one was 2/3 of those present?
Yeah, John, I'll talk to you.
Oh.
I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay, good.
Hadley, it's on the top shelf.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Mhm.
Hadley.
Yeah. Okay,
Where's the Parmesan cheese, Mom?
I know, right? That's important.
I know, she's making garlic bread, so I mean, it is,
Oh, yum.
Got to bring enough to share.
my daughter, she's 13, so anyway, she's cooking. I'm sorry, so, yeah, so I have all of these, I don't know, again, I wasn't able to make that meeting with the other the other gentleman, but, I think we're just more of, yeah, so so then I think our guide is really the Book of Discipline, because our church councils serve as quasi board of directors. And since we're basically operating as an unincorporated association, that's like the nearest thing we have. So I have excerpts from the Book of Discipline somewhere that I can send out about, here on mergers. Do you mind if I read the little blurb?
Oh, good.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
So this is, I think, is it paragraph 2546? Two or more local churches, in order to become more effectively fulfill their ministry, may merge and become a single church by pursuing the following procedure. The merger must be proposed to the charge conference of each of the merging churches by a resolution stating the terms and conditions of the proposed merger. The plan of the merger is proposed to the charge conference of each of the merging churches shall be approved by each of the charge conferences in order for the merger to be effected, except that for a charge conference that includes two or more local churches, the required approval shall be by the church local conference of each local church in accordance with the requirements of this paragraph. And then it says like the merger must be approved by the superintendent of the district, and then requirements in any laws of the state or states in which the merging churches are located need to be followed. And I mean, that's about it. That's what I mean, that's the meat of those paragraphs. So I kind of just wanted to throw that out there. Again, and everybody can kind of access, I can send out that PDF from there. I'm sure there's probably other mentions of it. I did a search in the electronic Book of Discipline. That was the only place I could find like mention of mergers. So I kind of think we're, I don't just want to say like that's the easy, but like I think it might not be as hard as we thought. Like we're only just dealing with our local church conferences then, right? So
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are you done, Heather?
yes.
Okay. So okay, so as part of the other merger, that's because that merger is a little bit farther ahead. We actually had a conversation with the attorney that Journey of Hope used to do their merger, and we were able to ask some questions and find out a little bit more about this. So basically, there's two levels to the merger. There's the merger at the Book of Discipline level. So Heather, you got that part right? It's thin. It doesn't talk a lot about the requirements other than charge conference to church conference, DS calling, all those things, right? The attorney that we talked to then said basically the level or the question at the state of Illinois level is whether you are incorporated for a non-for-profit or not. If you're not incorporated, so if you're a religious entity, whatever that means, right? That is the entity that requires all members to vote. And he basically said it's a pain in the butt. His recommendation to our other two churches were to incorporate as non-for-profits. And then what the voting requirements become is that the quorum, he was very careful about explaining this. He's at the quorum to vote are the people at the church conference, the people who are present either in person or who are present by proxy. if they are, so that's present. And then he said, and voting is those people that are present either in person or proxy that cast a ballot. Okay, because you're not required, even though you're part of the quorum, you're not required to cast a ballot. Okay. And the 2/3 number goes to the the quorum that is present and voting. When I asked him specifically about this thing we heard where if you were not present or not voting, that was a vote no, he said there's no such thing. He said that isn't a thing. Okay. But basically, so essentially in as my understanding goes, in the incorporation status, we would send out proxies asking people to vote. If they don't return them, then they don't return them. Then they're not present because they didn't return a proxy. Okay. Of the people who return a proxy, they can vote, and there's requirements on how many days in advance you have to give them notice. And the people in person can vote or not vote as well. But his recommendation was that we incorporate, just so the interface is cleaner. And then when we file the merger paperwork with the state of Illinois, that it is at that level, that legal level. Because if we do it as unincorporated entities, it somehow only gets registered at the recorder's office at the county level.
Yes.
And he seemed to think that that was a less robust legal arrangement. The other thing that he pointed out too was, because I asked him about, okay, after you do the merge, what did you have to do in terms of changing the deeds, changing the titles, changing the financial information, to the surviving entity? And he said, well, no. He goes, once you file the paperwork at the Secretary of State's office, that's the governing document. If your document says that all financial assets of Christ United Methodist Church become the property, or the ownership goes to First of Elmhurst, then that's it. All those things are legally considered to be part of First assets. You don't have to go through the exercise of changing everything to do that. And so I think that that's why, another reason he thought that doing it at the state level rather than at the county level provided a little bit more legal strength to doing the merger.
So Jim, can I ask you a quick question? So to understand, what he's suggesting is that each of our existing churches incorporates.
Yes,
Then
that's right.
we decide to merge, and we inform the state that we are merging, and we're gonna dissolve one of the incorporations, and all of the assets are gonna go to the other, in a sense.
Well, we would have to dissolve both of them because a new one would be,
Well,
Okay,
that's what I'm,
so-
that's
No,
what
no,
I'm
no.
trying to
So-
understand. Is
Or
it
it could
one and
supersede the
one, and
other one, I
then
guess.
those two go
Right.
away and there's a brand new one, or does one of them?
Right. So what he said was, he said in Illinois legalese terms, there's two different times. There is, he says there's what's called a consolidation and what is called a merger. The consolidation is that the two entities, neither one survives, and a new one is created. That's a consolidation. He said in a merger, one of them dies and the other continues. And I think for the most part, so I know, I think that there's, best practices in the vital merger, all the old goes away. But I think as a pragmatic exercise, it doesn't make sense to do that. Because then if there is not a surviving legal entity, then we would both have to transfer our assets and our property and everything to the new entity because neither one would survive. I think it's a lot easier for one of us to say the assets are going to the other one and call it a day.
Well, and the other reason we would do that, though, as to what you said, is because of how many votes would be required to decide to actually
Right.
do
Right,
this.
yes, right.
That's the primary underlying reason to, because it kind of seems silly to incorporate each of them and then do away with one or both. But what we're
Right.
saying is we need to do that, even though it's kind of,
That's right.
an exercise, so that we can do the vote in the most sensible way.
Right.
Vote, and then one of them gets merged into the other.
Right. So having said that, my ad board chair at Calvary did the paperwork and incorporated us, like on her own.
Yes, it's not hard.
Yeah, I don't think it's real hard. So I think that it probably makes sense for us as a next step from this meeting is for each of our churches to go off and do that as a thing. Now I can find out. So I don't want to start at square one there. Like I don't want to go by the book and find out how to do this. So I'm going to see if I can get my ad board chair at Calvary to give us a cheat sheet outline on what to do and what forms to do. I know she's been an entrepreneur for a lot of years, and she has incorporated a number of entities, and I think that this is second nature to her. So anything we can get to do that, I can share with this team, and then somebody, I don't know if it's you, Heather, or somebody else from First, can start pursuing that on your side, and then on our side, it'll be somebody, probably me, but I think that makes sense as a next first step. Heather, would you be comfortable? So you said you're moving at the end of the school year. Would you be comfortable pursuing that, or are you starting to get busy with your next life?
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean yes, I can do that.
Okay, let me see if I can get a cheat sheet from her, and then I'll share it with you, and we can see. You can make an assessment as to whether it's
Okay.
it's something you can.
I mean,
do.
I'm looking on. I already pulled up the website, and it kind of walks you through it. So, but yeah,
Oh, does it? Okay.
I think it'd be very helpful to have someone who's done it, because sometimes just having that the color, I guess, per se, on someone who's actually filled out these forms and
Okay.
something that is priceless. So
You know what? Let me see if I can set up a meeting between you, me, and Karen is her name. Let me see if I can set up a meeting after Easter that we can talk about that. Okay. So then before we talk about the funds, Jim, actually it's Jim and Pete, and it's kind of floating around here. Let me just relay what we decided to do in that other merger, because I think it's instructive for here too. We were in what I would call a death spiral, which you guys have called something nicer. But basically, every time we would talk about the merger over there, the question would get posed about, well, what are we going to do about the buildings first? Because the building is a 500-pound gorilla in any merger discussion. And then the next statement that would happen right after that would be, well, we can't decide what we're going to do with the buildings unless we know what the vision is. And so then every discussion
circular
about the
reference.
merger, right, that's right. Every merger, every question, every discussion about the merger was pinned on this relatively long lead time item of, what is the vision team going to come and tell us they want to do? How are we going to turn that vision into programs and missions? How is that going to affect the building? Because we cannot talk about the merger until we know about that. Okay. So what we decided to do, and what I would offer up to this team to consider, is basically we decoupled that. What we said is, well, we're kind of going down this path of the merger. It's pretty clear that, like I won't speak for FUMC, I'll speak for Christ. we could not do the merger, but we don't really have any path, any future path without merging. I mean, we'll simply, I mean, I don't think this is a surprise to John or Pete, we'll simply fade away from attrition. And we'll run out of people to take care of the building, and we'll run out of people to take care of the finances, and we'll run out of people to take care of the staff, and we'll just run out of people, and eventually we don't really have a lot of alternatives. So the argument was, why don't we complete the legal merger? Why don't we become one legal entity in the sight of the state of Illinois and the Book of Discipline and the Northern Illinois Conference? Is that we will merge. Okay, we're going to decouple the building conversation, and we're going to decouple the vision conversation. And so we're not even necessarily going to change the worship if we don't want to. We can just, but legally, we are going to be one. We're going to combine the trustees. We're going to combine the SPRC. We're going to combine finance. And then as a combined team, which this was the nice thing about it, is that in our conversations, we were always talking about, well, what are you going to do with your building? Well, I don't know. What are you going to do with your building, right? As a merged entity, we would be talking about our buildings, and we would be talking about the cost to maintain our buildings, and there might be a little bit greater sense of urgency to figure out this question. So what we are doing is we're pursuing just the admin legal part of the merger. And in the plan, in the merger plan, what it will say is the building decision is deferred. The vision is, so they're both ongoing. Vision is ongoing. Decision about the building has not been made. The merged entity will have both. But we will start operating like a single congregation. You know, whatever that means for worship and staffing and all those things it means. But we just, yeah, Heather, infinite loop is a good way to put it. We were just getting nowhere. It was very frustrating. So I would offer that to this team as something that we want to consider. Because I do think that the vision and the building are much longer lead time items than the actual merger. Heather, I think to your point, like the Book of Discipline merger requirements are very straightforward, and the state of Illinois merger requirements are kind of a pain in the butt, but are also pretty straightforward. You know, we just meet the meeting requirements and the voting requirements, and we do the paperwork stuff. And that part would be done, and then we could move forward together. So that's my suggestion of the way we try to break out of that infinite loop question.
Jim, can I ask you a clarifying question?
Hmm?
Because one of the thoughts, but I know it gets to the vote, but I just want to ask you is, given that neither of our entities exist on a legal basis right now, it seems like it would make the most sense to just incorporate, you know, a new church once. But the problem in doing that, right, is that it would require, it's a 2/3 vote of the entire congregations of each church to agree to that.
Right.
And you said, am I correct? You said that a no vote, I mean, a lack of a vote is a no vote in that case, right? Or not?
You know what? I'm going to have to ask the lawyer that. Our conversation really drifted more toward the incorporation because that's the way he was going. But it's an excellent question, Jim. You know what? Let me follow up with him and ask him if we were merging two religious, whatever they call them, religious
Institutions.
What are they called?
Unincorporated associations.
Unincorporated associations.
I guess my other question would be, if there's resources for us, because again, if we're deferring to the Book of Discipline, like, don't we need a Book of Discipline expert to, or because it's all, you know, hinged on like the charge conference.
Yeah,
So like, that's where I would maybe ask Jim and Joe. And,
Yeah.
someone at the, possibly the Northern Illinois Conference level, just like kind of just remind us of, so I'm trying to remember at the charge conference, like when when things are voted on there, we don't have to have a quorum of the entire membership. It's just the folks in attendance there, right?
Right. Right.
charge conference is just your ad council plus any clergy that you have as part of your church conference. The church conference is everybody.
Right, but I think that's just where we need to clarify understanding of like what the book of discipline is saying regarding a merger. Because if it's referencing, doing these votes at a charge conference, that's what makes, that's the thing that happens in like what?
The vote, so the
October,
vote, okay,
November.
so the way this, and by the way, so this lawyer that did it at Journey of Hope was the Northern Illinois attorney for a while. He was our chancellor for a
Perfect.
number of years. He's like hardcore too. Did you know him, Joe? Did you know him, David Axlam or
I didn't know that we had one.
I think it was
I thought
one
we were
did.
flying. Well, I knew we had one, and then he retired, but I was never notified who the new one was. So
We don't have a new one. I don't think we
Who?
have a new one. I think that this is the old one.
Yeah, who is the parliamentarian for the annual conference? Because that person would probably know what to do.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, so let me tell you what this lawyer told us. So Heather, what they did was, okay. So he said, number one, step one is you form a committee, which is this basically is this merger team / admin team. This is the committee that comes up with the merger plan as it would exist. Okay. Or at least the beginnings of it. Then he said, so then you have to have a duly called charge conference, combined charge conference, that would take that preliminary plan and hash out together what they want the final plan to look like. So that's essentially a working session that the combined charge conference would work on. They would produce this final merger plan that each charge conference then is recommending to their church conference. Okay. So then you have to have a duly called church conference that the DS has to be, I think that, so I'm not sure. I think the DS has to be present in both or has to approve both. Right. But then the church conference then is called solely for the vote. It's not to modify the plan. It's not to come up with, it's simply there to say yes or no. Your vote's there. And he said that's the process they followed a Journey of Hope based on the Book of Discipline. Joe, you seem to be thinking, are you thinking there's something different about that?
Well, I mean, I didn't talk with him. So I've never experienced a charge conference working on a document. I've only experienced a charge conference voting on a document. And so I'm not familiar with a charge conference operating in that fashion. That's what I'm thinking about.
Okay.
So if that's what they do, that's what they do.
Yeah, I think that that's valid. I guess the question is at what point does the church leadership, the two church leaderships get together and approve the plan? Because if you did it separately, right, then it's always going to be we propose this modification. Well, we propose this modification. Well, but we didn't like that and then it's like maybe it's a pragmatic question of that's why this committee, a joint committee, comes up with the initial plan, and then the charge conferences get together and as a pragmatic issue, let's just hash this out right now. And then we can vote on it. Then in theory, you could vote on it separately, right?
Right.
And
right.
they make, and then if each charge conference votes and approves it, then that's the recommendation they're making to their church conferences. And you still maintain, actually, you probably have to do that, right? Because then you maintain the integrity of the two separate bodies.
Yep.
But you had the working session together that you both know what you're voting on and you don't have to go back and forth, right? I think that probably meets the letter of the law and is pragmatic. least that's how I would do it. So, yeah, so I think, basically, so it's, again, we're kind of head on the other side. We're working on trying to come up with a timeline to figure out like how there's required days between the charge conference and the church conference. There's Illinois requirements on how early proxy votes have to be delivered to the members, that they have a chance to evaluate it before the shareholders meeting. But I have to ask the question now of the lawyer of what if we don't incorporate, what if we both don't incorporate? Is there any other governing document on the vote? So let me find that out, because I think the big boogeyman for one of the churches on the other side is they have a huge membership list with a lot of deadwood on it. And if their concern was if an absent vote is a no vote, they'll never get it passed. So that was, and I don't know what I would tell you, Christ membership list is pretty lean, because it just annoys me to have deadwood on stuff. So ours is pretty lean, but I don't know how First is. I get the impression First might have a lot of.
We've done a lot of work to reduce it, but our current membership is 246, and that would be very hard to track down 246 people.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
I would be in favor of incorporating, because if unless the former chancellor has a way of helping us incorporate as unincorporated, where we don't have to do a 2/3 vote of all membership, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, like I said, our conversation didn't revolve around the unincorporated scenario, but now it sounds like, again, it might fit our situation better not to go through that intermediate step, unless he tells me, no, you still really want to do it, and then he can do it, right? But let me reach out to him and find out what that'll take. Because then that would dictate our timeline too, I think.
So I have a polity question. So use the word quorum.
Mm-hmm.
And what does the state of Illinois decide as a quorum? Because I know what we as United Methodists decide as a quorum, but are those different? Or is the state of Illinois quorum fall to our definition of quorum?
Or the lawyer said a quorum in the voting case was present.
Okay.
Either in person or by proxy.
Got it. All right.
I think discipline, we're present, right? But not by proxy, right?
Not by proxy. But the proxy, I heard you say, is if people vote, that's considered present. But if they don't vote, that doesn't count as present.
So in theory, they could return their proxy and turn over their right to vote. Like, have you ever gotten a proxy from your stock ownership, right? In theory, somebody could say, well, I turn over all my votes to Reverend Joe Johnson, right? So they would be present because they let their wishes be known, but they didn't vote technically. Or they gave you the vote. I think, but he was very strong, at least in that scenario, about making sure that everybody had the opportunity to vote. He seemed to be very concerned about not short-circuiting that process, because that would give a pathway to legal challenges if somebody got a burr up their skirt or whatever. So let me research some of that stuff, and then we can figure out whether we should pursue the incorporation stuff or not. But that's a really good point. Maybe we don't need to. If the votes don't count as a no, it would only be whether every member has to vote. That would be a pain. So, okay. And then the last thing, oops, sorry, we're going a little long here. Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about the conversation about the conference funds available to?
Sure. So on a recent conversation with the district superintendent, am I on? I am, okay. With the district superintendent, he was asking us about the merger. He's very committed to the merger happening. In fact, he wants to vote approve the merger. Because remember his term ends on June 30th. I would love that if we can make that happen, but I also want us to be about doing it right and in good order as Methodists would. But so as we were having this conversation, I thought, well, hey, the church up on North in York just gave the conference $400,000 so that they could disaffiliate from the denomination. And so I'm like, well, somebody said, if you don't ask, you don't get, meaning Jesus. And so I said, well, what about that money? What's happening to that money? And he's like, well, if you guys could come up with a plan for what you might use that for, we might be able to, I could make a case for setting aside that money for maybe not all of it, but maybe even $100,000 to do something with this merger. So I like your face, Heather. So, and then I said, well, what about congregational redevelopment money? And I don't know I didn't look to see what the budget is for that. Do you have an idea, Jim, what that is? Jim Fu? Yeah, I don't really either. But there is money available in that as well. So what he said to me was, we probably should come up with a proposal and ask for a certain amount of funds to work on this merger. So that's the short of it, of the conversation I had. But I didn't want to let that $400,000 go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I see that Pastor Jim has put in several ideas here. And so just, any thoughts about those ideas or other ideas we might make a request for, and possibility of how much?
I'm just saying.
We're going to be, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead, John.
We're going to be supporting two pastors during that time period. Is there any possibility of getting any money for that? So we are only paying for one during that time period.
I don't know. My other question kind of,
I think that's a
Maybe-
possible.
Well, just think about it.
my
Kind of be
question
spent on
for
a
that
variety-
would be like, if we're gonna go ahead
Hold
merging
on.
the finance committees, like maybe we should get a handle on what we have operating wise. Cause that's like, the pastors are kind of more of a current, that we have, whereas like these others are specifically related to the project
Right.
at hand. And I guess, yes, the pastors are by extension part of that merger process, but like each entity is still supporting its pastor at this
Right,
current point.
right.
And so that's where I would be like, as a person on the finance committee, more interested in like, again, kind of going back to the theory of the building study, but so if we're gonna administratively go forward as a combined financial entity, what does that look like? What do those bank balances, what do those expenses look like?
Heather,
Now,
I don't
you
want to
could
put words in your
QuickBooks.
mouth, but maybe what we're talking about, and it's kind of like the list listed here, but is we could request funds for one-time non-ongoing expenditures to support what needs to specifically take place for the merger to occur.
Mhm. We can't hear you.
Sorry,
Pastor
yeah,
Jim,
does First have a 2024 budget?
Yes.
It does, okay. Is that something? So I'll just ask this because my experience with other churches has been iffy. Is the budget good? Is it reasonable? Like, is it like rooted in reality, or is it like an aspirational budget?
Well, I don't know, what's yours? You show me
Ours is-
mine.
no.
You show me yours, I'll show you mine,
Okay.
right?
Ah, yeah. No, ours is pretty solid. We track to it every month. And so we try to, because my home church did budgets out of the blue, which I always thought was a waste of time.
Yeah, ours is pretty accurate. It's not up to date now because I haven't changed the medical expenses, for example, nor the some of the other things
Probably
that
the
were
building
sort of
insurance.
tossed on us, but it's probably within 3,000 to 5,000.
Right.
No,
Okay.
that's not the sum, but plus or minus 3,000 to 5,000.
So Heather, are you if we can send you, if John can update the budget and we send that over to you, are you the rep? Are you like are you the chair of finance?
No. No, that's not me. No, I'm the bookkeeper basically. So I produce the financial statements. I mean, I can answer all the questions about the details and whatnot. I think that's something that we can talk about. Like our finance committee is pretty close, so we can have a little conversation and loop Joe in. And I think ours is it's accurate. So that's what we know.
Yeah. The other thing is, I could give you our last year's expenses divided in all the different categories and so forth. That would be probably a better estimation of where we are as opposed to the budget, which is
that's
flexible.
a good idea. Yeah,
Real
good
data.
idea, share the 23 actuals, 23 year-end actuals and 24 budget. That would make the most sense. That's a great point, John. Of
Yeah.
the budget to plan, but what actually happened. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's put that on the list too. We can update our budget, and we definitely have our 2023 expenses. So we can share both of those. As a side note, I did ask the lawyer this. A budget is not required for the merger documents, but so he said it's kind of up to you whether you want to share that with the congregations or not. But
interesting.
So I guess he was like, it's all about communication and answering the questions before they get asked. Like, okay.
So I didn't answer John's question. John, you had asked about congregational redevelopment and development funds for salary. I think that's a really good possibility. And I think having sort of looking at our combined budgets, and then I would even suggest making a 3-year proposal, actually. Because a lot of times that's how those funds are given. It's kind of a tapering fund. Like the first year you get the most, the second year is less, and the third year is a little less than that, and then you're out. Right. Heather.
So I pulled up from the Northern Illinois Conference. They have like a I guess an appendix, anyway, I see a line here called congregational redevelopment grants, and it says 10,000. Does that sound like in the right area?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what Christ and Calvary got when I was appointed there. We got a $10,000 pastoral support grant that lasted probably lasted 3 years, right, John?
Yeah, 3 years.
And then we got a 3-2-1 health grant, which was the first year they paid 3 months of the health premium, then the next year 2 months, and then the next year 1 year, and then we dropped off. So that's actually a good thing to ask for too. That's a good idea.
I mean, and as part of that, the DS did recommend that possibly Pastor Jim and I actually sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with Martin Lee, the Congregational Development Officer, before he leaves. He's retiring in June. So he was recommending that. He was suggesting that Martin's being pretty generous these days. So I think the quicker we can get a proposal together, probably
Yeah.
the better.
Where is Bensonville with this, by the way?
I'll answer. They're not as far as long as we are. Jim and I had a great meeting with them. Was it 2 weeks ago? That was 4 hours. So be thankful,
Yeah.
Jim. Our church council meeting was only 2.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think they know that they need to consider seriously merging. I just don't think they're as far as long in the process as we are. And I think that will come. But as of today, they have made a request. I don't think I'm going to spill any beans to anybody, but for a part-time pastor and for Jim and I to cease our regular Sunday operations with them. But we were pretty clear with the DS, Pastor Jim and I were that needs to somehow be coupled with us so that they still are engaging with us, because they're not long for the world either in terms of people and our cash. But I also, for me personally, I don't want to slow us down in our process, because they're still, I would say, in the grief process. I would say their key leaders totally get it, right? Would you say that's correct, Jim?
I think that's accurate.
And in fact, at that meeting, one of the leaders said this whole thing with their pastor moving and Jim and I coming was a blessing. This helped them begin to deal with the reality that's in front of them and provide them with some hope for the future. But I don't think they're as far as long as we are, and I just really don't want us to get slowed down for us. So that's where they are. That's where they are.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I ask 2 questions? One, oh, I lost one of them. How big is their congregation? And the second question is, when you say they requested a part-time pastor, do you mean a part-time pastor that they are going to fund, or they want the conference to fund, the district to fund, conference to fund?
So the congregation, I think they worship help me, Jim, between 11 and 15 on Sundays.
That's right.
And in terms of funding, I mean, I can't answer that because I'm not part of the compensation package, Jim. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because go ahead, Jim, sorry.
Oh, so I would tell you this though, that one of the things that Joe and I did, as just trying to get our arms around what their situation really was, is to take a look at their finances. Now, so as part of that kind of grieving process, they have held on very tightly to the idea that they had to have a full-time pastor, that this is actually sort of part of their identity. Like, we have a full-time pastor. But again, as part of us getting our arms around it, they were basically robbing Peter to pay Paul on that. Financially, they really cannot afford a full-time pastor, not at the minimums that you really should be compensating a pastor for. But it's probably within their realm to support a part-time pastor, because there's no health insurance, there's no pension, blah 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 blah, and those are big ticket items for full-time clergy.
Okay.
So I think, I mean, actually, it went better than I thought it was going to, because I think for whatever reason, they knew in the back of their minds that they could not afford a full-time pastor. But kind of like we talked about getting the building study, they just needed somebody to prove it. And so when we took their 2023 expenses, removed what they paid a pastor, and injected what a full-time, fully compensated pastor looked like, then they saw it. Then they're like, well, we can't afford that. Right, we get it. And so I think that's been, I think, again, having data as opposed to emotions and guessing and hope and fear, having some data in front of them is starting to help them realize where they really are. And I think like what Pastor Joe just said is true, is as they're getting more and more data, because their leadership sees it first, they're like, oh yeah, we really need to think about this merger thing. But then it's like, how do you start disseminating that information through the rest of the congregation and get them on board? And they just need some time to soak in this, is what the language I've been using, is it's like any other grief process. You need some time.
Thank you.
Do you remember your second question?
No, it was the two. It was the two. It was
Oh, okay. All right.
the size of their congregation and
Yeah.
if they were asking for the conference to fund that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going back to the merger, I mean, I would see them as being more of an adoptive merger rather than a vital merger, which is what we are trying to do. So we wouldn't recreate the wheel unless there was a really good reason. Like God came and said to me, "You must do this," right? So
yeah,
I think it would be more of an adoptive merger at that point.
Yeah, it is really interesting. Again, as Pastor Joe and I are trying to figure this out, we have taken a look at some of the mission insight, the demographics of Bensonville, and Bensonville, the city, is very different than Bensonville, the church, demographically. And so that has raised questions for us on what do they look like as a merger, a satellite, or something of our campus, whatever we call that. Because it doesn't necessarily fit one for one. I think the demographics of FUMC and CUMC match the demographics of Elmhurst.
Mm-hmm.
But their demographics don't match their city. And so it's a question.
Can I clarify something though? Because I think I know this to be the case, knowing somebody who's a member there, but Bensonville FUMC's demographics probably somewhat match ours, even though they don't match Bensonville.
That's
No?
right. That's right.
No?
I would say
maybe not economically. I mean,
not
racially
economically.
they do. Racially they do.
Racially they do. Economically they do not.
Okay, thank you.
And to the point that I don't know if they've said this to you, Jim, but knowing that I'm a pastor in Elmhurst, so like, yeah, Elmhurst is snobby. Like they said that directly to me.
Sure.
Right.
And
present company accepted. That's what Villa Park kind of felt too when we presented the opportunity to be part of the Elmhurst merger. Is, well, that side of 83 is really rich, and Villa Park and Bensonville and those areas are the working class suburbs.
Well, and again, people, I've worked in this community for 30 years now, representing it, and they're right. This community has become a very wealthy community that doesn't like to admit it and talk about it, but they're absolutely right. But the socioeconomics of this community of this community are vastly different from Villa Park and Bensonville, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. So they're right. Yeah. I can understand why they would be hesitant to merge with, in that situation.
But so if it were more of an adoptive merger where we kept a ministry site, not necessarily the ministry building, but a ministry site in Bensonville, it also opens the potential for our churches to be able to reach out into different kinds of communities that would require different kinds of ministry, but would also be very fertile grounds to do some work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a challenge. Interesting challenge. Okay, I think that I ran over, but it's an hour and a half. I guess that's not terrible. We've talked about everything that I really wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any other open discussion? Anything they wanted to bring up?
Who
Yep,
do
Joe.
I send the budget and uh, last year's report to? To Heather? Who?
Yeah, send it to Heather.
Okay, I think I have
Um,
this from the original.
Yeah, you can send it to me. I like to do that kind of stuff, so I can create a model of the two
Ooh,
together.
that'd be awesome.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Fun.
budget is in Excel. The
Excel is good. Yep.
2023 one, it will be as a PDF.
That's fine. I can work.
Although John, you can export that report out of QuickBooks to an Excel spreadsheet too.
To an Excel, would you prefer an
Oh,
Excel?
you guys have QuickBooks?
Yeah, we have QuickBooks Online.
Ooh, I want to talk about that. So, but that's another conversation.
So you want,
Yes, yes, that was a good move for us to have it on QuickBooks Online.
Yeah.
It was a very good move for us.
certainly helps print things.
Yeah. It was, I probably actually cannot understate how good a move that was for us. Okay, so any other questions or conversations then?
I just want to follow up on the request for to the conference for funds, and I feel like the sooner the better for that.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to maybe leave here with a plan. I don't have to, we don't have to know everything about it, like a plan to sort of work on that.
Well, so why don't we do this, Joe? Why don't we take the list, the list that we have in the agenda, plus the so I wrote down maybe adding a 3-year proposal for pastoral support. You mentioned, well, okay, so I guess that was a solid one. Was there any other solid suggestions or specific suggestions we had about adding any support line items there? The financial audit was not required according to the lawyer, but he said, but it's a really, really, really good idea. Like, okay. So why don't, you know what? So I guess the question is, do we, well, we could do it quickly right now. I mean, or we could do it offline and do it via email. Maybe that makes sense. But we put some figures to those 6 items on the proposal, and then we can add the verbiage around it and give it to Reverend Ross, our banker.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I do think we should separate them out either for congregation development funds or for, I don't know how they're terming the disaffiliation funds. Maybe we just say that for some of the disaffiliated funds from the former faith
Right.
church.
I know that when I got the grant for Christ Calvary, they were specifically called. We got it out of Martin's office. They were specifically called Congregational Development Funds.
Yeah.
But then when we start asking money for an architect or legal counsel, I
would
I
put
don't
those
know.
under expenses of merger.
Right.
Yeah, I guess we're just trying to. I mean, do we need to figure out where the money's coming from, or is that something the conference can figure out if we just tell them what the request is?
Well, Joe, can I make a comment just based on what's been said? If Heather looked up and there's $10,000 in for congregational development, and Joe has already had a conversation that there's $400,000 in these disaffiliation funds, to the point Joe made, I think we should be requesting those funds. And I'll just throw this out to try and expedite. And I'm just going to be really direct. I think that for items 1, 2, 4, and so for the architect, the legal counsel, the audits, and the incorporation, we should ask for $25,000 for each one of those 4. That's $100,000. I think we let Joe and Jim figure out what would make sense to ask for pastoral support over maybe a 3-year transition. And then I think if, and I hope John and Pete, you won't take this in offense. I think Price should pay for its building assessment, similar to how we paid for
Oh,
ours,
sure.
because I think that's
Yeah,
kind of a
no
good
problem.
faith
Yeah.
thing. So that would be my suggestion that maybe can help us roll us along pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be fair.
All right. Well, Pastor John, I'll be happy to put that together and maybe just send out an email before we
Okay.
approach the DS with that.
Okay. You said you're gonna do that? What? You said I'm doing it or I'm doing it? I can do
Well,
it.
I think I think you and I should, but I think to know that, I mean, we're going to need to know what the pastoral supports currently are. I mean,
Right.
I can tell you what mine is, but I don't know what yours is. So, I mean, this
Well,
is
okay, I can tell you what mine is. We don't get it anymore. So Martin's office, so the 321 grant expired, and then John, we didn't get the $10,000 grant got cut off.
Right.
So we don't. So if you're asking what we don't get anything.
no. I mean, like what you're currently getting paid. So if we're
Oh, what I'm currently getting paid.
like,
Oh,
and we
Sorry,
can do that.
can I
offline.
interrupt? I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Can I interrupt? Right, because if it's about figuring out your two compensation and then how to, why don't we
Yeah,
let
yeah,
the two
no,
of you do
We'll
that?
let you
Yeah.
guys do that.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, we can do that.
And if you're gonna ask for, 50% of that cost or something over the next 3 years, or de-escalating, or,
Yeah, no, I can
Or
definitely
whatever.
tell you that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very public knowledge.
Now, our Pastor Jim, I know that Calvary pays us.
Right.
When is that going to disappear?
So that intersects what happens in that merger, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what the DS and the conference's position is going to be on that. But
Well,
it's a
try
great
to
question.
include that in your salary figures for requests,
Yeah, in the rationale, that's a good thought.
with the idea that it will be dropping off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Will
mean,
drop down
basically,
sometime.
right. I mean, basically, what we have identified again on the other merger side is that we will need a conversation with the DS/conference, because we'll need to have a commitment from them as to what my appointment status is relative to them.
Right.
The same would be true here, because right, if
Right.
if they come back and say no, we have no intention of appointing you there, then you don't have to worry about this, right? So yeah, we have already said we need a commitment from them, which will be interesting to ask for too. But, okay, anything else? Okay, appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Yep.
And we'll
Thank
just
you.
try and write everything up. Okay.
Take
Thank
care
you. Have a
all.
good night.
You too.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everybody.